Hey y'all, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Emily. I built Freaked Out and Flawless because I needed it, because I live it. Today, we are talking about functional freeze. Often, this is the version of me that needs the work the most. And from the outside, she usually looks like she's got everything together. For me, this is the shutdown that nobody ever sees. It's the falling apart, and from every outside angle, it looks like a solid performance. On the inside, I'm white knuckling life, and I'm waiting for the day that all this hustle finally turns to peace. And I'm going through the motions, I'm making things happen, doing all the right things. Somehow though, life feels like I'm on a treadmill. Where's the journey? Maybe you're not moving. Maybe you're not going anywhere. And let me tell you, that's not a motivation problem. This could be functional freeze. If you've ever been told, oh, you're so strong, you're so capable, you're so calm in a crisis, wise beyond your years, mature for your age, and something inside feels hollow when they said it, like, no, I'm really not that strong. I just survived. Dude, I made it. I didn't do anything special here. Actually, what I was doing was surviving by the skin of my teeth and pure willpower, and somehow on the other side of that thing now, I'm still standing. So that's it. I don't know what you mean. And here's the thing. These people, they don't see those 2 a.m. shower scenes where you're, uncontrollably crying in your clothes, eyeliner everywhere. They see the performance version of you. If any of that sounds familiar, I think this is for you. Now today I'm going to get real and I'm going to share some things with you that I haven't said out loud very many times. Not because they're shameful, but because honestly, I was too busy performing to stop long enough to name them. So let's name them together. I'll dive in. I want to tell you about a woman in a NICU. That's a neonatal intensive care unit, and that means an intensive care unit for babies. Unknown to her, she is still reeling from a childhood of trauma, and she did amazing work. She graduated from high school, which enabled her to leave the foster care system. She immediately starts working in the electrical union, finds a man, gets married. She did the things, started her life. Now she's 20 years old, standing next to an incubator. Her son was born at 24 weeks, barely the edge of viable life. Overnight, she is immersed in a world of medicine she didn't even know existed. Never has even heard of a NICU before. Now, all of a sudden, she's learning medical terminology in real time and researching everything the doctors tell her so she can try to ask the right questions the next morning in order to increase her newborn son's probability of survival, right? Like she's working hard here. And the nurses actually ask her pretty frequently if she's a nurse herself. No, she's not a nurse. She's actually just a teenager running on adrenaline and survival mode, and the absolute refusal to fall apart in front of anyone that could use it against her. That woman was me. My own son spent 7.5 months in the NICU, and he came home with a feeding tube and a list of medical needs that became my full-time job. And I managed it. I managed it really, really well. People said so constantly. But what nobody really saw, I mean, like probably my mom, because you know how moms are. But what nobody really saw, and what I didn't even know, much less have the language for, was that my nervous system said, bye, bitch, and left the building. The whole time I was performing and I was functioning, but I was completely frozen. By the time I was 22, just a couple years later, I couldn't maintain my own home on a regular basis. My body, unraveled in ways that nobody could explain, which I now have a diagnosis for. It's called hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. But at the time, I was army crawling to the kitchen to make my kids food because I couldn't make my legs work right. And not too long after that season, I went into a season where I literally couldn't leave the house. My PTSD and I went on a journey, and I was afraid that my mailman knew I existed. And still, during that, even when I was in those dark times, when I had to show up, I did. I showed up. That version of me that walks into a room and handles business was always available. The cost? Everything I had. Because when she left the room, there was nothing left. She was gone. Looking back now, I can see how this functional freeze pattern showed up in every corner of my life. Like, upcoming appointments take me days to mentally gear up for. And these appointments, whatever it is, that's the event of the day. It can be a small appointment, a big appointment. That's all I could manage. Social happenings were the same way. I mentally gear up for it, and the day comes, and I don't want to go. I don't have the energy to put on makeup. I don't have the energy to pick out an outfit. I don't have the energy to go walk around and put on that smile. I'll clean my house for the company, but like the rest of the time, honey, it's only me living here. I mean, my kids, but it's just us living here in this lived in house. So I let it go. If I didn't cancel or avoid the event, I would get home and crash. And I am a person who needs days to recover to get back to this, like the functional around the house baseline. Any additional appointments or, things you have to do, any additional performances required in between these big events, they would just exaggerate and postpone and enlarge that burnout. And essentially, I was just bouncing between mania and bed rot. So that's a lot what my functional freeze looks like. And those are the things we're talking about today. Now, the freeze that nobody talks about is functional freeze. Last episode, we talked about the 4 survival responses. These are the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And when most people hear freeze, they imagine paralysis, inability to move, severe depression. Bed rot became a lifestyle, the obvious shutdown. And then there's this other version, the high functioning freeze, the one that looks nothing like what you'd expect. Dr. Peter Levine describes this freeze not just as stillness, but as a state of suspended animation. Suspended animation, are we like in some avatar pod somewhere? Let's talk about this. Your nervous system is braced for danger. The system is locked on DEFCON threat level, but the person is still moving, still talking, still performing through all the motions of a functioning life. Think of it like a car with the parking brake on. Excuse me, you've got the engine running, you've got the gas pedal floored, so the wheels are spinning, you're generating output, but that energy isn't pushing you anywhere. You're not going anywhere. What you are doing is burning rubber, making lots of noise, and stinking up the joint. So here's what suspended animation actually looks like in real life, in your body, maybe. You can go through entire conversations, entire days, weeks, and barely remember any of it. And it's not because something's wrong with your memory, it's because you weren't fully present to metabolize it. I've had weeks at work where I performed everything. I sent the emails, I completed the tasks, all of it done, all of it. I did it. And I got to Friday in a full panic that I hadn't actually really done anything. I'm going through my work and I find duplicate records. I'm double checking my sent email folders. I've got all these spreadsheets, so I'm checking everywhere, all the things, right? I'm convinced that I somehow dropped the ball, and yet the evidence of my own functioning was sitting right there on my screen, and I really didn't remember doing it. That is suspended animation. That's a functional freeze. To me, it really feels like living in a fog. You're here, but nothing really feels quite real. You're present, but it's almost like you're watching yourself from a third person view. You're watching yourself move through your own life, surviving from moment to moment, living for that moment where I might actually fucking feel something. And underneath it all, I'm wondering, why do I even exist? What is the point of this? And I'm also wondering, is this the Harry Truman show? These are the things that signal it's not depression as a mood. These are the signals that you're operating on a nervous system that has been running on emergency reserves for so long, it doesn't even remember what it actually feels like to be present and alive. Now, let's revisit the window of tolerance. Your window doesn't always stay open. It narrows, sometimes to a sliver, and you spend your life in that sliver. You're white knuckling it, performing all the competence you can muster, and your nervous system is running on way less than fumes. And sometimes when the weight does finally get heavy enough and those reserves run dry, the battery's dead now, that window slams shut on your fingers. That's when we hit true crisis mode. And honestly, that's when I want to shave my damn head. But that's not being dramatic. That's biology. Your nervous system is over here signing off on decisions you didn't consciously sign off on. That in and of itself is a trigger that continues this cycle. I want to talk about what that actually looks like because a lot of people listening right now aren't even in functional freeze anymore. You're already past it. You're already in the shutdown. And maybe you don't have the language for it yet, or maybe you don't have the resources to handle it yet. This might look a lot like that hopelessness that feels so fucking heavy, it feels like fact. And the world is loud and repetitive and exhausting and disgusting. I mean, we've got Diddy and Epstein, and I mean, none of it even feels worth the effort anymore. This hopelessness is so loud, dark loud. The kind of thoughts you don't say out loud, you're not really sure anyone would understand, and honestly, you're not sure that you want them to. This might look like the Netflix show you've been staring at for 3 hours, and you couldn't tell anyone the plot of, like, hoo, I don't know what happened, who did what, where are we? I'm gonna go back 3 episodes even though it says I watched it. This could be the scroll that goes nowhere. You're scrolling on your phone and you've scrolled so far that your algorithm isn't even giving you new content anymore. And yet, here you are, still scrolling, unable to convince yourself to get up and do that to do list that is running in your head. Maybe it's the shower that you keep meaning to take and you're putting it off, convincing yourself it's so that you can have that healthy hair. And I'm just going to agree with you here. It's for hair health. One of my main culprits is actually the male pile. I prefer to ignore my mail, and that's actually why a lot of things in my life are on fire because I don't pay attention to the notifications and communications that people send me. It's also these texts, the text you read and you can't make yourself answer even when it's from your mom or your sister or somebody important, and they know. You still feel bad about it, and just give it a few days. You'll get there. You'll respond. These are the things that show you a closed window. It's like getting out of bed to pee and just counting that for the win. It stays like that. And sometimes that's weeks, sometimes that's longer. And you're cycling through the same thoughts and you find yourself in rumination and you're trying to find a reason, trying to find that motivation somewhere in the rubble of what your life is supposed to be. That's a closed window. That's not weakness. That's a nervous system that ran out of runway. And a closed window is not a broken window. It ain't gonna be painted shut forever, honey. It can be opened again, slowly, with the right conditions, enough turpentine, and a little makeup. I mean, enough nervous system safety, one small signal at a time. And that's where you might be right now. This platform was built for you specifically because I see you and you matter. You don't have to perform your way back. I just need you to stay. This popped into my head right now. this running on fumes, exhausted in the sliver of window. I actually have a car with a failing fuel pump right now. And what that means is the gas burns out and it burns out extra fast at an exponential rate because the whole system is compromised. And so I have a mass air sensor and O2 sensors and this and that, and everything's malfunctioning. And my budget says that this repair is a few weeks out. That's just the reality. So in the meantime, it runs, it drives mostly. So we count it reliable for short trips, but I'm not planning a random road vacay, right? Like that's not on the horizon. But continuing to drive, the cost is extra high. And I don't quite know when it's going to leave me stranded. One day it is going to fail completely. So I'm running on luck right now, right? That's really the same situation as a dysregulated nervous system. It gets you there until it doesn't. The cruelest part, you can maintain that for years or decades, and the world will call you resilient and strong and empowered the whole time. I know this because I lived it, and more than once. Here's one example. In 2020, I was running my own marketing agency, working full time at my grandma's tax firm that I was supposed to inherit, and I was on again the rise to success. Once again, on my way up. I was doing all the right things. I was showing up, helping my grandma get to appointments, helping her run the business, running my own business, hiring my own personal assistant, taking out a massive personal loan to fund everything that had gaps, and taking up space, taking imperfect action. I was doing it. Then the drama that happened surrounding her passing was a flippin' telenovela, and it was the final straw for me. I fell apart entirely, and I'm not joking. I was in crisis mode. I was l- near vegetative state. Sometimes I think I was a vegetable. And I was either completely numb or apathetic to life, like I didn't give a shit about anything, good or bad. I didn't care. Or I was so insanely depressed and on the verge of pretty dangerous territory with ideations that multiple times said I needed to go to the hospital. The window had been narrowing for years, and I just didn't realize it until it finally slammed shut. Here's the piece that I think is one of the most important but most invisible factors: the curated persona. When you've been in functional freeze long enough, when survival has been your operating system for years, you stop knowing who you actually are. You've been too busy being whoever the situation required of you. I had a home personality, a work personality, a church personality, a romantic partner personality, a public personality, and on and on. Slightly different arrangements of all the same qualities of myself, sure. Some added here, some removed there, but each personality was curated for safety. And it turns out that's not character development like I thought. It's actually my brain's way of creating adaptations for safety under chronic threat. The DEF CON level threat that's always on, that's a nervous system that learned the real me isn't safe here. So let me find it and give them the version they need. And it works. I mean, a girl can bat her eyes or drop a couple tears. There's a lot of times, and not always in those contexts, but just to drive the point home, giving them the version they need. Performative, it works, and it works so well. People think that they know you, they know the real you. They think you're fine, they think you're thriving. Underneath all that performance and feedback, you're still asking yourself for years, am I when nobody needs anything from me? When I don't have to show up as daughter, when I don't have to show up as friend, when I don't have to show up as worker, who who am I underneath those things? And if you've never had a real answer to that question, like me, that's not a personality problem. That's likely a form of functional freeze. Now, excuse me, over the next weeks, we will dive more into these questions about our values and who we are and connect with some of these long lost pieces of ourselves, because that's what Flawless is all about: learning who we are aside from the stories that shaped us. But stick with me while we go through some of these basics and build the foundation that will allow us to be successful later on. Now I want to talk about why high performers are often the most invisible. Because here's the thing about functional freeze that makes it so hard to catch. The world rewards it. You get praised for being calm in crisis and promoted for your reliability even when you're running on fumes. And you're called the strong one and the capable one, and you're the one everyone leans on. And every piece of that positive feedback teaches your nervous system performing is safe, falling apart is not an option. So you continue, you perform harder, and the freeze grows deeper. In The Body Keeps the Score, Dr. Besser, sorry, I mispronounced his name again. In The Body Keeps the Score, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk writes that trauma doesn't just live in the mind, it actually lives in the body. And one of the ways that it lives there is in the chronic nervous system bracing, also known as hypervigilance. The managed numbness, the disconnection and disassociation from your own physical experience, those things that let you function through situations that were dangerous or unsafe. So, because of those trainings, you stop feeling things in real time and you process them later, sometimes years later, or maybe not at all. But that whole time it still lives in your body. And you get very good at moving through everyday experiences without metabolizing them. Most likely, you didn't have the time or a safe space to process your experience, and now it lives on. It's almost like a light in the attic. You just bought this house, and there's a light in the attic that you can't turn off because it's behind a locked door, and no one seems to have that damn key. And it lives in the back of your mind. You go for a walk at night, taking your dog out for their final business, and you see it from the street too, but you can't do anything to reach it and turn it off. That's what it's like. And one day something small will happen. An email, a person's tone of voice, somebody changes the plans, and your system fires off like you've been hit by a damn truck. And suddenly that attic door busts open, years of dust and cobwebs pour out, and everyone around you, including you, wonders what the fucking problem is. And now think about the last time something did completely derail you. A comment that shouldn't have mattered that kept you up all night. Maybe it was a meeting that went sideways, or a text that sat wrong and left you troll scrolling, and you couldn't explain, maybe even to yourself, why it hit so hard. That's not you being dramatic like you've been told your whole life. That's the accumulation of overloaded circuits finally breaking through. The problem is the voltage accumulation, the years and years of managed freeze finally running out of capacity. Transformer blown, neighborhood power outage, a brain outage. That's not a breakdown, that's an electric bill coming due. One time during work, the owner of a company came into my office verbally berating me for the tone in my email, which was a defensive position regarding some HR nuances. I was firm and slightly accusatory in my email, but I wasn't rude. And honestly, an owner shouldn't be behaving like an offended teenager, even if I had been rude. I could have handled my communications better, but that's besides the point. This situation put me in a place I'd never been before with a boss. The storming in, the verbal berating, the required apology, personal attack, it completely changed my view of the company, my role, and my willingness to be there. And this experience triggered things that had nothing to do with the boss lady, but it affected me deeply. From that moment on, I was gone. Long before I vacated my position, I was out. Every single time that person was around, my nervous system was activated. I no longer felt safe in my work environment. And because of that, I checked out. I changed my loyalty. I changed my way of showing up, and not just when she was around. My entire work experience shifted. That experience cut through my freeze performance. And for one, I was no longer willing to perform. And two, it made me realize just how much I was still performing, even when I thought I was being genuine. Not too long after, my nervous system called in the bill. My health flared for many reasons and forced me to leave. I was living out a functional freeze phase while believing I'd already done that work and cleared that. I want to be honest with you about something. There is no fast way out of functional freeze. There is no hack. There is no three-step protocol that rewrites a nervous system that spent decades learning to shut down for safety. Not to say that you won't have breakthroughs that hit like a runaway Mack truck, but that breakthrough is a sprouted seed, and now it needs nurture. Where the freedom is comes from returning. It's a slow, patient, non-linear process of building enough safety in your body that the real you starts to feel like it's allowed to exist. From that safe space, you will build experiences that teach your nervous system what safe is now. You are programming the security update your brain never downloaded. And the whole goal of our work here is to finally become the programmer, not just the one pressing remind me later on those required updates anymore. You know, your phone forces you to update because it stops functioning properly if you don't. Your brain is the same way. So that's what widening the window of tolerance actually means. It's not a dramatic shift. It's tiny accumulated moments of I I am here. I am okay. I do not need to perform right now. Small updates. Security patch for version 437.2 of you. This builds a baseline of safety and allows you to open that window wider and catch the breeze. For me, that started extremely simple. I finally got to a point where I looked at my life and I made a decision. I'm either going to die or I'm going to fight like hell to make it out of here. So I started small. Over the course of about a year, I made many small changes. I had to retrain my body to be upright again and nurture joints that had completely stopped cooperating. And somewhere in that process, somewhere between the floor and standing, I started to feel human again. Fluoride-free water, forcing myself to run small errands, getting outside and putting my feet on the ground in my own backyard, sunlight for nutrition, not a tan, dry skin brushing. I'm swapping out toxic chemical products one by one, catching up on all that ignored mail, and yoga. I would put both wrist braces on, both knee braces, and sometimes both my ankle braces, and I found this lady, Tara Stiles. That was my unlock. Following a Tara Stiles yoga video on my living room floor, all braced up. That was my 5% day. That was the first crack. That was the first day that I felt hope again. That was the day I finally felt a little happy waking up. And I looked forward to my time on the mat. It finally felt like my existence was worth something that day. Your version of the ankle braces on the floor might look nothing like mine. Maybe it's stepping outside for 2 minutes. Maybe it's drinking a glass of water intentionally instead of desperately. Maybe it's just sitting in your car and not going inside yet. It doesn't matter what it looks like. It only matters that it's real. It only matters that it's real, and it matters that it's yours, and it matters that it becomes accessible on your worst day. The day I knew I got a little piece of me back, but I didn't know how foundational that little moment of wanting to exist would carry me through some really tough years ahead, and it brought me here today. Okay, I collected myself. I'm back now. Thank you for sitting with me in that moment. Some work came up for me, and I had to go regulate myself right there. Welcome to Freaked Out and Flawless. Okay, so that day, I knew that I got a little piece of me back, and I just didn't know yet how foundational that little moment of wanting to exist would carry me through and bring me here today. In Polyvagal Theory by Dr. Stephen Porges, he tells us that safety is a physiological state before it's a psychological one. That means it's a physical state before it becomes a mental state. You factually cannot think your way to feeling safe. Not through journaling, not necessarily through therapy, not through more talking about it or ruminating on it for that matter. You have to build it from the inside out, one small signal of safety at a time. So remember, the body first. Always start with the body. Your job this week is not to unfreeze. Your job is to notice. Notice where you perform. Notice the version of yourself that shows up at work versus the one who shows up at home versus the you that's alone. Notice the gap between what you show when you're performing and what you feel. And not to fix it, not to start, another to-do list. Just to see it. Awareness is the work. This is how we flow living awareness. And if you're wondering why those words sound familiar, I didn't do that by accident. Flawless isn't just a name, it's a map. Flow, living, awareness, wondrously learn, emotional, spiritual sustainment. I know, I know, it's a mouthful. It's okay. But every episode I record is moving you through that map, whether you realize it or not. And the point here is awareness before action, always. Your micro habit this week? Live one moment where you let yourself be unperformed. And I'm not saying start a full habit, just one moment this week where you exist unperformed. This might be in your car before you go inside. It might be in the shower. It could be when you take a walk. It's wherever you can find 60 seconds. That's only 1 minute of not being anything for anyone but you. No fixing, no processing, just existing as whatever version is actually present for that 60 seconds. That's the practice. And that's how the window starts to widen. I have a journal prompt for you. Where in my life am I performing instead of living? And now we always bake in the grace, baby. If this week you notice the freeze and can't stop it, that's still the work. Remember, noticing is part of the work. You don't have to fix what you can just barely see. You just need to keep looking and showing up. So if you find yourself frozen, bullying yourself for it is only going to dig you deeper. To get out of a freeze state, we have to meet ourselves where we are with love, baby. One thing that really helps me here, because I tend to be extremely negative and critical with myself. So I have to hold myself accountable with something like this. If I wouldn't say it to my best friend on the playground, don't say it to myself. Don't be my own middle school bully. Easier said than done, I know. Trust me, I know. That's the work, though. Noticing and practicing. That woman in the NICU who looked like a nurse, she's still here. I'm still learning what it means to actually live instead of just perform. And I'm still in the work just like you. I see you. I see that performing version who looks so good on the outside, and I see the one underneath it. You aren't alone. Sometimes it just really feels like it. So I'll see you in the work.